Hello everyone and welcome to my video today where I'm going over the 2026 US Senate elections, and today I'm doing a fun scenario video where I'm going to be looking at every single Senate race that's up in 2026, looking at the most recent poll in all these states and filling in the map as it goes on the most recent poll. So it's going to be interesting to see where the most recent poll in the state has the Senate map for 2026. So without further ado, let's get into the Senate map. We have 35 Senate seats to go over. We're going to go from west to east. We're going to start with the Senate race in the state of Oregon, typically regarded as a pretty reliable, safe Democratic seat for the incumbent Jeff Merkley. Now, for the predictions in the general election, they're all solid Democrat. There is currently no polling data for this race. So when there's no polling data, I'm going to go with the consensus rankings for this. So it is listed as safe Democrat. So I'll put it as safe Democrat, which for me means a 15-point margin of victory or higher. Next, we're going to look at the state of Idaho, next door to Oregon, obviously, with Republican Jim Risch versus Democrat David Roth. Now, again, solid Republican rankings across, but there is actually a poll from a Republican Peak Insights poll from about the beginning of June, so not too long ago, showing it looking like a 40-point lead for Risch over the Democrat, so no real surprise here that Idaho goes as safe for the Republicans. Now, Montana will be interesting as this is our first, more competitive type Senate race on the map that we're going over between Republican Kurt Alme, Democrat Alani Bankhead, and Seth Bodnar, the independent, who is endorsed by John Tester, the former senator. So this race could be more interesting. Our rankings here are kind of split between likely, lean, and solid Republican, though I do know for a fact we have polling in this race. A Gray House poll from June 23rd showed Alme at 41, Bankhead at 25, and Bodnar at about 17. So let's see, what's quick math here? That's about 16% or so lead for Alme over Bankhead in that poll. So about a 16% lead would just by 1% put Montana into the safe Republican column. Next, we can go to the state of Wyoming. Wyoming, something tells me this one's going to be pretty reliably red as well. It is an open race with Cynthia Lummis not running for re-election. I do believe Harriet Hagman, the representative of the district for the Congress for House, should win that primary. No polling, but it is solid Republican across the board, so we'll put Wyoming as safe for the Republicans. We're also we're going to go to South Dakota as well because I don't think we're going to see probably too much polling out of this one as well. Mike Rounds, the Republican senator, will be facing off against Julian Beaudoin and Brian Bangs in the general election. Solid to likely Republican rankings. I'm a little bit surprised there's even some likely Republican ones, I'm not going to lie. We do have a public policy poll from May 29th showing that Rounds at 43, Bangs at 23, and Beaudoin at 18. So you're looking around a 20-point victory in that one, which would also put South Dakota as safe for the Republicans. Now, Nebraska, we know Nebraska is going to be a close result, as this is going to be Republican incumbent Senator Pete Ricketts. He's facing off against Democrat Cindy Burbank, but the main one to talk about in this race, the main name to know, is Dan Osborne, the independent candidate. He's the guy that's giving the Democrats the most optimism at winning this race. Listed between likely and lean Republican from a lot of the rankings here. Most recent poll for Ricketts versus Osborne is going to be Tavern Research, which had it at 47 to 42. Now for Ricketts versus Burbank, 48 to 39 from Tavern Research, a 9-point poll. So there's no poll that has all three of them in the race, and we're not even totally sure Cindy Burbank's going to stay in the race here. So in terms of what we're going to do for the video, we know Dan Osborne is the more significant challenger, so it might be a little bit of like a, I don't know if it's cop-out is the word, or like a, I guess, I don't know, kind of like getting off easy may be a way to put it. I'm going to put it in that poll for Osborne versus Ricketts as lean Democrat, that 5-point margin. Yes, I know Osborne's an independent, but for the purpose of today's video, we're just going to leave him in the Democratic category. Now we'll move on to the state of Kansas. Let's see here. Kansas Republican incumbent Senator Roger Marshall. On the Democratic side, Democrat that's running Adam Hamilton, a pastor, is giving Democrats some optimism in this race. Mix of rankings between solid Republican, lean Republican, and likely Republican. In that same poll from Tavern Research, it shows Marshall at 54, Hamilton at 46. So about an 8% lead for Roger Marshall in that race. This will put the Senate race in the state of Kansas as likely for the Republicans if it is only an 8-point lead. Oklahoma, I have a feeling Oklahoma is going to be pretty reliably Republican. Republican Representative Kevin Hearn will be the GOP candidate. No polling yet, but all solid Republican rankings except for one. We can put Oklahoma safely into the Republican category. Next, actually, before we go to Texas and Alaska, let's just get Colorado and New Mexico out of the way first, because both of them have a feeling we're going to know how it's going to go. John Hickenlooper will be facing off against Mark Beasley in the general election. No polling yet, but all safe Democratic rankings again, except for except for The Economist. Colorado goes as safe Democratic. Now we can go to New Mexico, where last time I checked, the Republicans have failed to nominate a candidate. Larry Marker has gone on the ballot, I think, as a write-in candidate, but this race is going to be solid Democrat without an established Republican nominee candidate. No polling, but New Mexico will go over 15 points as safe Democrat. Okay, now we come to Alaska and Texas, two very close marquee Senate elections. First, we'll go to the state of Alaska, where this is going to be Democratic candidate Mary Peltola facing off against Republican incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan. Now, two rankings have it leaned Republican, but most do have it as a toss-up, including the most recent polling average from Race to the White House, having it at Peltola plus 0.4%. However, the most recent poll from New York Times and Siena University from the middle of June showed Sullivan at 47% and Peltola at 45%, making it a 2% Republican lead. That's also the first poll that we've seen for Sullivan over Peltola in this race since August of 2025, before Peltola even announced. So, could be a little bit of movement in the race. We'll have to wait and see, but most recent poll is Republican +2, where I'll put Alaska as lean Republican. Now we'll go to the state of Texas, where this is going to be Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton, who defeated John Cornyn, the incumbent senator, in the primary, will be facing off against Democrat James Talarico, in a race I know Democrats are very optimistic in. Likely Republican, lean Republican, and 3 toss-up rankings on the prediction side of things. For the polling, very close between Talarico and Paxton, all under 1%, but Talarico's leading in 3 out of the 4 averages on this. The most recent New York Times poll from the 19th to the 27th showed it a tied race, but the A2 Insights poll, which came out just about one day after that in terms of when the date was administered, has Talarico at 48 and Ken Paxton at 46. So technically the most recent poll in the Texas Senate race has James Talarico up in a lean Democratic category. Certainly something we don't see a whole lot on the Senate map, so very, very interesting. Next, we're going to move to the state of Louisiana, with the primary now settled. Julia Letlow will be facing off against Jamie Davis. A mix of rankings between solid Republican and likely Republican. Most of them are solid. I don't really think it's going to be that competitive anyway, but we'll put it as solid Republican as the predictions do say. Next, we'll go to Tom Cotton's Senate seat in the state of Arkansas. Cotton will be facing off against Hallie Schaffner in the general election. Safe Republican rankings. Most recent poll from Gray House in February showed Cotton leading over Schaffner by about 20 points, about 22%. Arkansas goes safe for the Republicans. Again, no real surprise there. Now we go to Iowa, where Iowa is a very competitive Senate race. This is Joni Ernst's seat. She's retiring. We do know the primaries are settled. Representative Ashley Hinson will be facing off against Democrat Josh Turek in this race. Lean Republican to toss-up rankings for this one, so showing to be a very competitive race. For the most recent polling, Hinson leads in the average by 0.9%, but the most recent poll from the Fox News, Beacon Research Shaw and Co. Research, which is Fox News' official pollster, shows Turek leading over Hinson actually by about 4 points. The New York Times poll from before that only showed Hinson leading over Turek by about 2 points. We do know, obviously, polling in Iowa is historically wonky, but the most recent poll has the Democrat leading by 4 points, so we'll put Iowa as a lean Democratic win. This map is certainly looking very, very different than we're accustomed to, which, honestly, pretty fun. Minnesota, Democratic primary still needs to settle itself between Peggy Flanagan and Angie Craig. We do know on the Republican side, Michelle Tafoya will likely win that Republican primary. As for the general, likely Democratic rankings from most. For Craig versus Tafoya, the most recent poll is about a 7-point lead. And then for Impact Research, Peggy Flanagan versus Tafoya, also a 7-point lead, same percentages and everything. So for the most recent poll out of the state of Minnesota, it seems regardless of the Democrat, Minnesota goes as likely Democratic. Next, we'll just go quickly to the state of Illinois, sort of while we're in this area of the country. Democrat Julian Stratton will be facing off against Republican Don Tracy. No polling yet, but safe Democratic rankings from most. Illinois goes as safe for the Democrats. Let's go down to Mississippi and we'll work our way up towards Michigan. Mississippi, a Senate race with Cindy Hyde-Smith, the Republican incumbent, who, despite Mississippi being a safe Republican state, Hyde-Smith's 2020 election was actually more competitive than expected, so this one could potentially fall under 15%. Safe Republican rankings from most, though. The most recent poll from Impact Research shows that in the three-way race of Hyde-Smith versus Collin versus Pickens, it's only about a 3-point lead for Hyde-Smith, and then in the 1v1 versus Scott Collin, it's also only a 3-point lead. So even though I wasn't expecting it to be this close, Mississippi goes as lean Republican, falling under that 5-point margin. Next door in the state of Alabama, this is going to be Republican Barry Moore. He's won the primary. He'll be facing off against Democrat Everett West. Solid Republican rankings from most. No polling yet. So Alabama will go as a safe Republican state. We'll just do the state of Florida real quickly while we're here before we go to Georgia, because Georgia obviously gets a ton of attention in this one. We want to give it its proper amount here. For the Senate election, we're expecting it'll be Ashley Moody winning the Republican primary, the appointed incumbent U.S. Senator, and Alex Vindman will likely win the Democratic side as well. For the general, a little bit of a mix here in the rankings. From solid to lean to likely Republican, it's kind of all over the place. The most recent poll of Moody versus Vindman, which I think is what the matchup is going to be, is about a 7-point lead for Moody over Vindman, so that would put the Florida Senate race as likely Republican. Now we'll go to the state of Georgia. This is Democratic incumbent U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff. He's obviously someone that won very narrowly in 2020 in those runoff elections. He's looking for re-election for a second term. He'll be facing off against Republican Congressman Mike Collins in the general. In the rankings here, only 2 have a toss-up, 3 lean Democrat and 1 likely Democrat, so technically the consensus for this is lean Democrat. But when you look here, Ossoff's raised about $81 million. Wow. The polling shows Ossoff up about 6 points. The most recent poll from WIC showed Ossoff at 47%, Mike Collins at 43%, so it'd be about a 4-point Ossoff lead. Though I do need to note, wow, 13-point lead in that Fox News poll. That's massive. But the most recent poll is a 4-point lead for Ossoff. So based on that, Georgia will go as lean for the Democrats. South Carolina, it almost feels a little weird to talk about this race, as we don't know who the Republicans are going to be necessarily in this one. Now that the Republican incumbent Lindsey Graham has passed away, Annie Andrews will still be the Democratic candidate for the general. Mix here, 2 have it as solid Republican, 3 have it likely Republican, 1 has it as lean. Obviously, we don't know who the candidates are yet as of the time I'm recording this video, so there's been no polling done yet. The consensus rankings do have it as likely, so I'll be putting it as likely Republican, but again, a little bit too early to really speculate what's going to happen there until we know who the Republican candidate will be for that race. For the Senate seat in the state of Tennessee, Republican incumbent Bill Hagerty will be the Republican nominee again. The Democratic primary is still a little too early to say, though Marquita Bradshaw seems to be the leading candidate right now. No polling, but most of the rankings have it as solid Republican. No real surprises there out of the state of Tennessee. Out of the state of Kentucky, this is Mitch McConnell's Senate seat. Andy Barr won the Republican primary. Charles Booker, the Democratic primary. Solid Republican for most of the rankings. The most recent poll, though, from Public Policy polling from December shows it roughly about a 9-point lead. Nope, that's wrong. Did the math wrong. That's about an 11-point lead for Barr over Booker, which would still be in that same likely Republican category. So we can put Kentucky as a likely Republican win there. Okay, now we got to talk about the state of North Carolina. This is Democratic former Governor Roy Cooper running against Republican former RNC Chair Michael Whatley for the race currently held by U.S. Senator Thom Tillis. Early on, looked at one of the closest Senate races in the country. Now Roy Cooper's opened up a lead in this race, a pretty wide lead. It's listed in most prediction sites as either lean Democrat or likely Democrat, but the polling shows that Cooper's leading the average. Look at this, 8.4%. Though the most recent poll does give a little bit of optimism for the Republicans, not a ton, but from the Public Policy polling, which is a Democratic internal pollster, Cooper is leading 48 to 44%, not breaking 50% and only up 4 in a Democratic poll. Typically, bias accounts for like a 4 to 5 point swing here. So that could possibly mean that Whatley's within striking distance of maybe catching up to Cooper if this poll is accurate, and then you see more polls like this one. But again, for the purpose of today's video, Cooper's at 48, Whatley's at 44. That's about a 4-point Democratic lead. So North Carolina would be a flip and go in the lean Democratic category. In the state of Virginia, this is Democratic incumbent Mark Warner. Had a very close race in 2014, not so much in 2020, and looking like to be even less close in 2026. 3 Republicans are running in Kim Farrington, Burt Mezuzwa, and David Williams. Mezuzwa seems to be the likely Republican candidate this time around. Solid Democratic rankings, across the board. The most recent poll here, over a 15-point margin for Warner over Mezuzwa. We can put Virginia as safe for the Democrat. West Virginia, we can look here at the Senate race. This is held by Shelley Moore Capito against Democrat Rachel Fetty Anderson. Solid Republican rankings. Currently no polling, but West Virginia will put as safe for the Republicans. The state of Ohio, another very close competitive Senate race in the 2026 elections. This is the seat that J.D. Vance held before being vice president. John Husted, the lieutenant governor, was appointed. Democrat Sherrod Brown, former U.S. senator, ran in the Democratic primary and won. Now we're on to the general. Toss up for most of their rankings. The polling, the averages, Brown's currently leading by about 1.3%, but the most recent poll from the New York Times and Siena has Husted at 50, Sherrod Brown at 47. Definitely a very close race underway in the state of Ohio, but a lean Republican win for John Husted in the Senate race in Ohio as of right now. Now we can go to the state of Michigan, another very hotly contested Senate race in these midterms. In the midterm elections, this is the Gary Peters Senate race. He's not running. The Democratic primary is now down to Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens, so that has to play itself out still. The current polling since Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens became a 1v1 race is going to be very interesting. Tavern Research poll showed it at Abdul El-Sayed 41, Haley Stevens 42, so really 18% undecided, anyone's guess as of right now. For the general, most of the rankings have it as a toss-up. For Abdul El-Sayed versus Mike Rogers, the most recent poll has Sayed up by 1 point. For Haley Stevens over Mike Rogers, also the most recent poll has the Democrat Stevens over Rogers by 1 point. So a very close race, but a narrow tilt Democratic win, a 1-point margin in both polls for Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. So very close race underway there. The state of Delaware, this also probably won't take us too long here. Very reliably safe Democratic seat with incumbent U.S. Senator Chris Coons running for re-election. No polling yet, but safe Democrat across all the predictions. No surprising, Delaware goes safe for the Democrats. Now we can go to the state of New Jersey, which again, not going to be too competitive either. Cory Booker, the incumbent U.S. Senator, is facing off against Justin Murphy in the general. Safe Democrat from most of the rankings. No polling yet, but again, no surprise, New Jersey will go safe Democrat for the longtime incumbent. We can go to the state of Rhode Island, where this is going to be Democratic incumbent, Jack Reed. Also a longtime incumbent, should win that primary, no problem. Solid Democrat for the rankings for all the predictions. University of New Hampshire poll from the middle of June, so not too far long ago, shows Reed up over Raymond McKay, roughly about 17%. That would put it as a safe Democratic win in Rhode Island. Massachusetts, the Senate race, the Democratic primary is probably the most competitive part of this race. We know that John Deaton, the nominee from 2024, will be the Republican candidate once again. The question will be whether Ed Markey or Seth Moulton emerge from the Democratic primary. The early polling shows Markey at 42.5%, Moulton at 31.7%. Though the University of New Hampshire most recent poll had Markey at 41, Moulton at 35, so about a 6-point lead. So it has narrowed compared to the average overall, but we'll still have to wait and see how that goes. For the general, solid Democratic rankings, for Markey versus John Deaton, the most recent poll shows roughly about a 16-point lead for Markey, and for Moulton versus Deaton, about a 20-point lead. So either way, both are over 15%. Massachusetts goes as safe for the Democrats. Now we have 2 Senate seats left in New Hampshire and Maine, both of which are actually pretty competitive, very competitive this time around even. In the state of New Hampshire, we know it's going to end up being Democratic Representative Chris Pappas. He'll be the Democratic nominee to succeed U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen. On the Republican side, we have John E. Sununu, the former U.S. Senator, and Scott Brown, the former U.S. Senator of Massachusetts, running. In that primary, Sununu will emerge likely as the winner and be the Republican candidate. For the general, most of the rankings have it as lean Democrat, even though Pappas is beating Brown about 12 points. Against Sununu, it's a closer race, 4.6% in the polling average. So the most recent poll from Peak Insights from June 24th through 27th shows Pappas only leading by about 1 point, whereas St. Anselm College's poll before that, about 2 days before, has Pappas up by 6. So technically, the most recent poll has Pappas up by 1 point. Obviously, if you've been watching the video, you know I'm not doing any adjusting for the bias of the poll. And this one, was more for the prediction, my own personal prediction videos, not so much just for this one. But New Hampshire goes as tilt Democrat, like with Michigan. Now we have the Senate race in the state of Maine, which obviously big wrench has been thrown in. We know Susan Collins will be the Republican nominee once again. We don't know who the Democratic nominee is currently going to be after Graham Plattner has dropped out of the race. In terms of what happens, I mean, it's anyone's guess. It could be Troy Jackson is someone that is declared to be running. Troy Jackson. It could be Shayna Bellows. It could be Dan Kleben, Paige Loud, Nirav Shah. A lot of potential Democrats that it could be. I don't know if there's been any polling in terms of how it's going yet. There has been one poll, actually. Troy Jackson was the leader on this one. So my early pick for this race was Troy Jackson. So just for the purpose of today's video, we'll stick with that because I do think he's the likeliest Democratic candidate. He fits more of the similar mold of Plattner in terms of policies wise and being a more progressive Democrat. So I think Jackson fits there. So we'll have him be the candidate. For the general, still toss-up from most of the rankings in this race. The polling between Susan Collins and Shayna Bellows' most recent poll is a tie between Susan Collins and Troy Jackson. The polling averages Jackson up by 2.2, but that Zeta A research poll shows Collins up 47% for Jackson. Even though Maine utilizes ranked choice voting in the most recent poll, technically Collins is up by about 1 point over Jackson. So we're going to go and put Maine, as of right now, as a tilt Republican state. So based on the current most recent poll in every single state as of the time I'm recording this video, Democrats are favored to win 51 Senate seats, Republicans are favored to win 49, which means the Democrats would flip the U.S. Senate and take the Senate majority in the 2026 midterms. Obviously, polling isn't 100% accurate, and this map looks very, very wonky. I mean, a red Republican win in Maine, a red Republican win in Ohio, but then a Democratic win in Nebraska, Iowa, Texas, and even Mary Peltola holding in Alaska or losing in Alaska. It's a very interesting map. It's certainly not the most common map for 2026, but that's what the most recent polls in every single race says. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave them down in the comment section below. What you think of this video and what you think of this map, and do all that fun stuff. For now, though, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I'd really appreciate you hit like and subscribe, as it really does help out me and my channel. For now, though, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.